Okay, so welcome everyone to our third academic seminar, and today our professor Verwurt will, am I saying the name correctly? Verwurt. Okay, Verwurt will present his talk on the topic of free will and consciousness studied from the point of view of philosophy of science. I will start the presentation. So, and you can tell me when to.
Or maybe I can do it myself.
Yes,
even
sure,
better.
sure.
So
Okay.
I suppose it's this.
Here,
Okay.
yes.
So thank you, Anastasia, for organizing, and thank you, Igor, for coming here and being the opponent. Good day to everyone. So I'm pleased to give this presentation on free will and consciousness from the point of view of philosophy of science. So this is research I started doing already 5 years ago or 4 years ago. And my main interest was at the time, and still is, to connect features of consciousness and free will to artificial intelligence and neuroscience. Okay, and that will be the topic of my talk next week. Today I will do a typical exercise of analytic philosophy and study what philosophy of science could teach us about this famous notion of free will, which I believe is very closely connected to that of consciousness. How much time do I have?
About 40 minutes.
That's excellent. If it gets close, then let me know. 5 or 10.
It lags. On here.
Okay, good. Yeah. So maybe 5 or 10 minutes before time.
Sure.
Let me know. Yeah. So what is a very old question in philosophy, as you all know, do we have free will? And well, many great philosophers, most of them have studied this question. Many scientists have studied this question. And well, not surprisingly, no, that's too early.
You can click.
No. We should go back. Then I think that we should use a different presentation mode because this is not practical.
This is just how it shows up when I start. Maybe.
Spoiler alert. Exactly.
Lags, sorry. Let's restart.
What if you do it like this?
Like this, okay. I'll start.
But then do I have the presentation mode and the animations?
If I do it like this, no. If I click the presentation mode, the previous one that lagged will show up. And
but are you sure that it's still lagged? Because sometimes you just need to
let's
let's
try again. And if it lags, and if it lags, we'll do it another way. Okay.
So do you recommend me how exactly to?
I think
to do the clicking with the finger here. Okay.
You see.
Okay, but if it's 1 second, is okay.
Let's do it like this. Okay.
So, as philosophers, I think that no one will be surprised when we want to answer the question, do we have free will? Well, everything depends on the definition, okay? if, as many people do, well, many people believe that free will actually is best defined in the following way, in a very absolute or absolutist way. They say free will is a capacity to choose between different options independently from any external influence or uncaused except by myself. Okay, so that's, if you like, a very absolutist conception of the notion of free will. Well, fully independently is maybe exaggerated. You can equally well say, you could perhaps better say, at least in part, independent of external influence. There is a different view on free will, which I would call here the agent point of view. AG means agent, which is a different capacity, namely capacity that is involved in choosing as decision-making, in agency and in moral responsibility, and which is grounded in the obvious feeling of being free. Clearly, most of us have the impression that at least at some moments we are free. And maybe there is a different, it makes sense to define free will, not in this absolutist way, but in a different way, which namely, well, that will be the topic of my talk today. So in a way in which, you know, free will intervenes in decision-making, okay? What is also important to realize is that our legal system is based on this notion of free will, okay? So at least that notion might be, you know, explored in philosophical analysis. Okay, so people generally believe in free will. What could be that free will if it is not that absolutist notion? That will be the thing I will study today. But let's then maybe go to the...
that clearly doesn't work out. No.
Next slide.
Yes. Okay, this one.
Okay.
You can continue. It's
So, first of all, a remark. I believe that this absolutist notion of free will does not make much sense from a scientific point of view for several reasons. First of all, from a purely scientific point of view, ultimately, we human beings, including our brains, are a physical system. And according to the best physics theory we have, which is quantum mechanics, all the constituents of our brain evolve according to the Schrödinger equation, which is a deterministic equation. Or to look at things from a different point of view, I would say that it is very natural to consider human beings as systems which are in a causal network. If reductionism is true, at least if in principle we can be considered to be physical systems or even biological systems, well, science tells us that, you know, physical and biological systems are subject to laws which make us part of a causal system. Okay, everything we do, everything that happens ultimately is caused. There is that seems what science tells us. There is nothing which comes out of nothing. So if that is true, where would be this, this capacity to choose independently from external influences, uncaused except by myself? This brings up another question. What is this myself? Okay, what would be this myself except for what science tells us, namely a biological and a physical system which is subject to laws. So this is a scientific point of view. Usually it is called determinism. I believe that there are good arguments in favor of determinism, but the model I will explore is actually independent. It can exist if the universe is deterministic or indeterministic. Next slide. Okay. So, not surprisingly, most philosophers actually, other idea is that in the state of the art debate in philosophy, there are essentially two schools, so libertarianism and determinism. Determinism is essentially what I said in a moment. Libertarianism is the school which says that, well, no, there is no determinism. We have free will. This school actually posits free will in this absolutist way as a given. Okay, it says, well, science is not helpful here. We can look at things from a different point of view. Perhaps they mean a theological point of view, and from that point of view, we posit the existence of free will. Okay, and the libertarians typically they say that determinism is false. Next slide. So to summarize things, we have basically two views on free will. I'm somewhat simplifying. On the one hand, on the left hand, are the determinists who say there is no free will, at least not in an absolutist way. They say everything is determined because, for instance, they can use several arguments. One is that the fundamental equation, the Schrödinger equation, is deterministic. They can refer to the fact that we are part of a causal chain of events, that there is no such a thing as self-causation out of nothing. And on this side, you have people, famous people like Einstein, Spinoza, Tolstoy, and very many more. On the other hand, you have the libertarians like Popper, Eccles, Kant, Kane. Well, Kant can be debated as always. And they say, no, there is something more than this, just physical substrate or scientific substrate. We have a mind or a soul, and this soul or mind has a free will. Of course, the people on the left-hand side, they immediately say, well, but what is this mind beyond the biological or biochemical brain? Okay, I personally consider this as a weak point of the right side. It's difficult to explain what would be this mind beyond the brain. Okay, but okay, these are all not so important considerations. I'm giving you a quick overview of some main ideas. As I will tell you in a moment, actually the majority of philosophers, they belong to the so-called compatibilist school, which is, if you like, is a combination of determinism and libertarianism. They say, well, even if determinism is true, there is room for free will. Both are not in opposition. I belong to the school, actually. Okay, I will come back to that in a moment. So first, just 3 slides on what neuroscience tells us about free will. The most famous experiment is from Libet, who measured the brain activity of patients, of people, let us say, and asked them to press a button or lift a hand at a moment of their choice and note the time at which they pressed this button. So people chose freely, spontaneously a moment. They looked at the clock, what was the time on a precision watch, and at the same time, their brain activity was measured. So what is strange in this diagram is, well, first of all, there is a very small, on the right-hand side, there is a small delay between the moment they record on the clock and the time they press. This is simply the time needed for, you know, the brain signals to go to their finger. This takes, I don't know, 50 milliseconds or something, but that's not important. What is important is before the moment they decide freely, spontaneously to press the button, there is already brain activity. You can see it better here on this slide. So the strange part is the left part, where even before people freely decide to press the button, there is already a brain activity going on. So this is Libet's conclusion. He says that, well, this seems to indicate that free will might be an illusion, because it seems to be the brain which decides rather than the conscious mind of people. Before they freely make a decision, the brain is already working full time. Of course, this interpretation is debated. Other people say that's not a conclusive argument. Other people say that it reminds them of what Schopenhauer said: man can do what he wills, but he cannot will what he wills. Okay. So this is very famous. An even more surprising and more recent experiment is done by a group in Berlin, Leipzig, and Ghent. And they have put people in an MRI machine, asking them, for instance, when they heard a beep, to choose freely, spontaneously, to lift their left or right hand. And this experiment, so you can repeat this, let's say, every minute, there is a beep. And then at that moment, people, you know, spontaneously have to choose left or right. And actually, by looking at the brain activity, these researchers could predict 10 seconds in advance, you know, which finger or arm they would lift. Okay, not with perfect precision. So this is a statistic experiment, but in many, maybe 70% of cases, simply by looking at the brain activity, they could predict which what action they would do. Okay. Even if in principle, you know, the people were asked not to think in advance, you know, which finger to press. Okay. Okay. Also not a maybe fully convincing or conclusive argument, but still a famous experiment, and which you know, neurobiologists are usually on this side who believe that free will is a illusion. So as I said, a majority of philosophers are compatibilists, and according to compatibilism, determinism is true, but at the same time, humans do have a form of free will. I'm interested in that theory for the reasons I mentioned, and also because it has the advantage that such a model can interface with artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is usually believed to be a stochastic, a statistical science, but in reality, it's a deterministic one, because all the stochastic properties of the system are simulated with a pseudo-random number generator, which is deterministic under the surface. Okay, so this is okay. This is a side remark, not important for us. What I will do today is to propose a compatibilist model of free will, and my approach was to try to synthesize ideas existing in the literature and try to solve problems of existing models. So this is a method which is not very often used in recent analytic philosophy. I think that's a mistake. In other sciences, synthesis or unification and problem solving is actually the royal road towards a theory building. My main sources of inspiration were first the work by Ayer and next by Mahner and Bunge. And these, of course, use ideas or inspire themselves by ideas coming from Aristotle and Kant and other philosophers. I will say a little bit more about these influences in a moment. Ayer, as you may know, is the well-known philosopher from the Vienna circle, or at least from the logical positivist, and his simple and still very powerful idea, I believe, is that free will should not be opposed to determinism, but to constraint. That one of the essential ingredients of free will is that it is, a capacity to do things without being constrained by other people or by a mental disorder. Okay. And the second condition for a free act is that it should be voluntary, but he does not explain further what voluntary means. Mahner and Bunge do that. So this is my model now, which I call the CMT model. I'll explain you where this acronym comes from. Before I plunge into that, just a preliminary observation. It seems that free will comes in degrees. For instance, think of your favorite dog. Does your dog have free will? Could it have done otherwise? Has it alternatives? For many philosophers, this alternativism is a necessary condition for free will. Well, some people will say, well, no, my dog has no free will because it's an animal. Other people will say, yes, it has maybe an embryonic form of free will. But as I said a moment ago, the free will that most philosophers are interested in is the free will needed for moral responsibility. Okay, so it's a high level form of free will, if you like, and it is essentially a human thing. Okay, but granted, one might say that a dog possesses an embryonic version of free will. I like this idea that free will is a matter of degree, actually. Similarly, you can wonder, has a newborn child free will? From what age has it free will? Has a fetus free will? Many people would say no, but if free will exists, then it seems that it evolves with, some mental capacities, right? That seems to be a rather a convincing idea. And here we see again that, a free will might well be a matter of degree. In the model that I will present in a moment, the essential ingredient is that free will is strongly related to consciousness, okay? And it also comes in degrees, and I will try to explain you where exactly, how to measure these degrees. Okay, here is the model, okay? This is actually a synthesis of the model by Ayer and that of Mahner and Bunge. So I'm using here heavily a brilliant book by Mahner and Bunge, Foundations of Biophilosophy. I was so lucky to know Mario Bunge in Montreal. He sadly passed away a few years ago, but has written about 100 books. Amazing, even if slightly, underrated philosopher. We can synthesize these ideas in following simple definition. So action A by animal B is free-willed or free, is made of B's own free will, even only if two conditions. The first condition is that the action is unconstrained, so there is no programmed or external compulsion. There is no one with a gun forcing you to do the act. And the second condition is that the action should be conscious, and conscious means here, the action is conscious in that the action is monitored by some other mental activity in the brain of B, and monitored means recorded, analyzed, controlled, or kept track of. So this is Mahner and Bunge's point of view. Actually, there is a lot of, you can find it in the book, there is a lot of good evidence from neuroscience that when you are conscious about doing something, for instance, you're conscious of lifting this bottle, you are not doing it in an unconscious way, but you're conscious of it. Well, actually, neuroscience seems to indicate that there are then two brain circuits at work. So there's the first circuit, which, is doing the lifting, and then there is a second neural net, which is, is thinking about that lifting. So that's the background of this definition. Okay, so here now comes the contribution of the articles that I wrote together with a colleague on this issue. Here is our contribution, and we ask the question, how, by what means does the brain monitor, meaning record, analyze, control, or keep track of actions and mental activities such as having ideas, intentions, perceptions, etc. So what we propose is that this monitoring always involves hypotheses, assumptions, reasons, or in an intellectually demanding context, theories. Okay, maybe that seems far-fetched to you. The main reason why I wanted to explore this road is that it will later allow me to connect with neuroscience and especially with artificial intelligence. Okay, I will show you that next week. So let me give examples. Okay, for instance, when you are freely decide, when you make a free decision, a conscious, well, yeah, let's simply say a free decision. According to this model, you're always, you know, using in this conscious free decision a set of hypotheses, a coherent set of hypotheses, actually. For instance, when you are freely deciding which clothes am I going to wear today, you might, if it is a conscious choice, if you're not just grabbing, you know, in a reflex, the clothes you have put on your table the evening before, but if it is conscious, then you do some reasoning. You may, even if this reasoning might be semi-conscious, you may use the belief that, well, your suit, your green suit, for instance, is more appropriate today because yesterday you wore your red suit, and you're conscious, or you're using the hypothesis that, well, it's nice to be, you know, to vary your outfit. So basically, you're quickly using a very simple, call it law of, you know, collegial behavior, and therefore you're choosing the suit of the other color of the day before. Or another example, suppose that your neighbor comes to you and asks you, hey, Mr. Verwort, can you please help me restarting my car? If this is a conscious decision, you may say, yes, I'm going to help you. If this is a conscious decision, according to this model, this decision is based on some hypothesis. For instance, you may say, well, yeah, I'm going to do it because, you know, this neighbor usually gives me a beer when I help him. So that's nice. Let's help him. I have some friends who are Kantians by nature, and they make decisions because they believe, in this case, for instance, because they believe, yes, well, I will help him because helping people is good for human beings, is, you know, altruism is a source of happiness. So that some people, maybe a very small minority, uses ethical considerations even in small decisions like this. Okay? Well, I leave that for debate. I don't know if you agree with that. We can gladly discuss it. There are contexts which are more demanding and where you really need scientific theories. For instance, you're the commander of a spacecraft, and some object might hit you. Then to make the free decision to steer your spacecraft to the left may need to involve some mechanics. Okay, sometimes these theories are very elementary, but you can still call them theories of mechanics when you know that, well, using this stick here and turning it to the left will make my engine go to the left with a power of, I don't know, 50 megawatt. Okay, so these are examples, and maybe we can discuss this further, of where free and conscious decisions are involving sets of hypotheses, beliefs, or even theories. So this is a summary of what I just said. So this is the essence of this CMT model. It simply takes the ideas of Ayer, Manner, and Bunge, but it adds that the conscious action is involving monitoring through, that the monitoring occurs through beliefs, hypotheses, and in general theories. I will use this word theory with a star to say that it's more general than scientific theories. Coherent sets of hypotheses or beliefs are fine. You can also call it a perspective. I use this word theory, by the way, because it's well known what theories are in philosophy of science. Okay, so this explains where CMT comes from. CMT is a somewhat barbaric acronym and stands for conscious through monitoring through theories. I couldn't find anything better, so excuse me for that. And of course, this is a definition which focuses on the rational or cognitive consciousness and free will. Okay, I'm not saying that theories are involved, for instance, in reflexes, for instance. But still, according to this model, if the choice is conscious, then it involves such theories in the general sense. So this was published in these two articles. If you want to read the details, you can find them there. And what I will do now is to relate this model to other theories, recent theories in analytic philosophy on free will, and show that it can solve problems of these other theories. Before doing that, so notice that we can now answer the question, well, what are these degrees of free will? Well, I would say that these degrees of free will, they reflect the degrees of adequateness of the theories or the models or the representations or the beliefs that are involved in your decision making. Okay? When one is doing acts, when one ponders about a choice, one may use beliefs or theories or hypotheses which may be solid or, in other words, adequate for the given situation or less so. I have the impression that is degrees that one can distinguish in free will is related to that. Maybe also a topic to what one can discuss. Another way to see degrees here is, I would say, the degree of monitoring. If you're taking a very quick, if you make a very quick decision without deliberating longer than a fraction of a second, then one could say that this is also not necessarily the highest or the most, the highest form of conscious free will. In any case, we have here a way with this model to grade somehow the correctness or the adequateness of free decisions. From this point of view, the art of making the right free decision is using the most adequate beliefs and theories. This is a bit an elitist idea. I have to admit, I have rarely seen it in recent literature on free will, but it is clearly present in Kant's philosophy on free will. So Kant has written a lot of free will, but I think I can summarize his main idea in the following way, that for Kant, real free will is will under moral law. And this can be easily subsumed by our model. It can be translated, if you like, in our language. We would say that, well, free will is will in accordance with, monitored, controlled by adequate moral assumptions, beliefs, and theories. Okay? So that's a way to agree with Kant. Here is a famous, more recent theory, namely that of Frankfurt. Frankfurt is, I would say, one of the five most famous recent theories of free will. It's called the hierarchical mesh theory. And in a nutshell, according to this theory, an action or choice X is free-willed if it is the object of, or if it meshes with, a second-order volition or desire. And what is a second-order volition? So according to Frankfurt, there are two volitions involved in free will. There is a first-order volition and a second-order volition, and both, if the act is free, should correspond. He calls this, they should mesh. What is it? What is this second-order volition? Well, it is a higher desire about the first-order desire to do X. According to Frankfurt, if that is the case, if there is a correspondence between the first-order and the second-order volition, then your choice is really rationally desired. It is in agreement with one's real self, with one's second-order rational desires. In other words, the choice flows from the will one wants, a reflective capacity animals do not have. So this is only this, high-level free will is only a human thing. This again we can translate in our to our model. We would say, well, second-order volitions are part of the general beliefs, worldviews, etc., that an agent uses to guide and control his or her life and actions. X meshes with a second-order volition in the sense that it is consciously monitored, assessed, analyzed, etc., through a worldview, a belief system, assumptions of life, in other words, theories in the general sense. So Frankfurt's theory, yes, Frankfurt's theory has been discussed in great detail by very many philosophers, and perhaps the most crucial problem of this account is the following. People say, well, Mr. Frankfurt, all well and good, but there are people who can be brainwashed, and at the same time, according to your model, they would be free. Okay, other people, and people then typically continue to say, well, but brainwashed people are not free. Why, according to Frankfurt's model, brainwashed people are free? Well, because, they can really want what they're doing. They can have second-order volitions which tell them, yes, for instance, stealing is good. Imagine a person, Trina, who has been raised in a community where stealing from other communities is considered to be something really good to do. So Trini is brainwashed to believe that stealing is good. And people say, well, Trina's second-order beliefs are perfectly in agreement with what she is doing. According to Frankfurt, she has free will, but in reality, that's not a good outcome of this model because, brainwashed people are not really free. Well, we can deal with this case in a different way. We can say, yes, she may be, using beliefs and in this way being conscious about certain acts, but the worldview or the hypothesis, the assumptions that she is using are not the best ones. Okay, therefore she has a limited form of free will, if you like, or a degraded form of free will, because simply her hypotheses, which are always involved in free and conscious decision making, are of a less adequate nature. So very simple solution to this problem, which is discussed in the literature. A well-known theory of free will is Fisher and Raviza's reasons responsiveness view, which puts an emphasis on guidance control involved in a free act. In a nutshell, according to this theory, an agent has free will if her actions and choices are sensitive to respond to reasons, where it is emphasized that this reasons responsiveness should not rely on luck once in a while, and that it is incompatible with compulsion or neurotic disorder. Rather, the agent should be responsive to reasons through a systematic mechanism that ensures guidance control over her actions. So here too, we can make a link with the CMT model. First note that the concept of conscious control is explicitly in the definition. It's already part of this MBA model. And the conscious monitoring of an act via adequate beliefs and theories thus seems to imply reasons responsiveness and guidance control, or at least we can reconstructed to imply this. Fisher and Ravita's model has the same problem with brainwashing as Frankfurt's model, and we can solve it in the same way. A last model of free will, which is well known, is that of Wolff, which calls her theory the reason's view of free will. Wolff's is also a mesh theory, but it's not exactly the same as Frankfurt's model. Frankfurt's model, you can call it a subjective matter, because an act of free will, an act is free as long as there is a mesh between the agent's choices and his personal, subjective, higher level desires. Wolff says, well, that's not enough for a free act. She says that these personal desires should also have a objective connection with the outside world. They should, according to her, connect with the objective true and good. So according to her free will, one should have the right objective reasons to do things, reasons that connect to the true and good. So we can again translate this to our model and then say that an action should be consciously monitored, guided by a sufficiently adequate theory, moral or other. It seems this can be understood as expressing that the agent should have adequate reasons for his or her act, reasons that connect with the true and good, in the sense that they're involving, embedded in, or backed up by adequate theories in a broad sense, for instance, moral hypotheses or principles. That's essentially it. So I will conclude here. So in a slogan, according to the CMT model, as soon as an act is not purely triggered by reflexes, by feelings of fear, when people are arguably not really free to act, they act out of a strong compulsion, if you wish, of fear, or they do an act with a reflex. Well, if this is not the case, then it is one always monitors, analyzes, and controls an act, choice, or decision with reference to or within a perspective, a set of coherent or less coherent assumptions or a theory. So there's a compatibilist model, because this kind of process can be going on even if the world would be perfectly deterministic. Determinism is not excluding that some people do monitor and act through a coherent set of hypotheses, and other people use a less coherent set, or yeah, let me put it that way. So it is a model of free will, but also of consciousness, because essentially, according to this model, consciousness is the essential ingredient of free will. The other ingredient is that a free act is not constrained by a third person or by a neurotic impulse. And so I've tried to give some arguments why it can relate to other models and why it can even solve problems of other models. More details in the publications that I showed you a moment ago. I'm also interested in this model because I believe, or I hope it allows me to say something about, well, about artificial intelligence. To what degree could artificial intelligence, mimic a human consciousness? So this model, has some very simple ingredients, which we can, and I will do that next week, which we can relate to the capacities of artificial intelligence. Okay, that's what I will do next week. If I still have 1 minute, I would like to say one last thing. I did not speak about determinism. Okay, people, as I said, 1 second. People typically say, well, in a compatibilist framework, determinism may be true, but that's not really influencing our view on free will. We can still be free, and they call this compatibility. I prefer the term complementarity. I do believe that it is useful to address this question of free will, not only through this notion of free will, for instance, as developed in this CMT model. I think it is also useful to look at it through the lens of determinism. That is what, for instance, philosophers as Spinoza have done, or more recently, there are people like, what's his name? Pierobon is a famous member of the school. We say, well, it's very interesting to look at things through the lens of determinism. I did not do that at all today, but if you believe that there is no absolutist notion of free will, in other words, that our actions, well, they may be consciously monitored, and they may even be consciously monitored through adequate hypotheses, but at the same time, they had to be done the way they are done. Okay, that's what determinism says. When one does a so-called free act, it may be conscious, but it is at the same time unavoidable. Okay, that is a very strong, very counterintuitive position that not so many people believe in. I think that it's still a fascinating position, which also answers questions, but that's not what I discussed today. Still, in a full theory of free will, I would argue in favor of complementarity, that both points of view should be used to address this question of free will, even if I did not discuss this determinism much today. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Okay, now I will give word to the opponent, Igor Mikhailov. Maybe you could sit in my place so you can be.
Yes.
Would you need the slides, or I can close them?
We have a session of questions to play.
After a commentary, yes. Yes.
Thank you. Only this thing, because I have some records. I've read one of Louis' article very extensively, and this article coincides very much with what was said, yes, and what was presented. In fact, you have sent me two articles on free will, and one of them is longer, and the other is short, I suppose. I've read the longer one, and well, my technical problem is that when I was reading this PDF, I was putting my remarks just inside, and when I opened this, and I was doing it using my MacBook. But when I opened this worked over PDF in my iPad, all my remarks have gone. So I had to quickly reconstruct them in another place. But anyway, I should say that, well, first of all, I'm very grateful for being invited. I'm very grateful to you because this topic of free will, it is not my topic. I have never written anything about this. I've never done any research on free will. But it is closely related to the philosophy of consciousness, which is one of the topics of my research. Well, I would like to thank Anastasia as well, but she's temporarily out. I will do it later. So I believe that when each of us proposes, any of us proposes some innovative theory, model, or anything like this, it is very useful to have some external opponents, because when a theory is truly innovative, it necessarily or more probably leaves some issues unresolved. And if someone brings our attention to those unresolved issues, this person will help us to improve our statements. So in general, as far as I can remember, the CMT model is has three parts, three components: consciousness, monitoring, and theories. And each of the parts, in my view, has stronger points and some issues that need to be resolved. Stronger points are obvious and are highlighted by the speaker, by Louis. The main strong point of the whole model is that, well, of course, it is compatible with different standpoints known in the philosophy and maybe in the science as well. You cite Koch very much in the article. He's more.
That's an older article. That's where I discuss more determinism.
Okay. Okay, but he's an example of philosophizing scientist, as far as I can see.
Yes, but he's a strong libertarian.
Libertarian, yes. And he's the author of one of the most popular empirical theory of science, of consciousness.
Yeah, true.
Of consciousness. Okay, and what can I say about these three components of Lee's model? About consciousness, first of all, Louis takes as an explanatory theory for the consciousness, he takes the theory which is usually referred to as high-order thought theory. You date it back to Ayer, Mario Bunge, and some other person, some third person. But it is widely known as a theory of David Ross
Of consciousness. That there is no such a thing as a higher thought theory of free will. You're the first to note it, and you're right. But in the free will community, people are apparently not aware that you have this pendant in consciousness.
Well, and I think, I believe that this choice of theory explaining consciousness should be grounded more obviously than it was in your publication and in your today's presentation, because luckily we have choice. We have free choice of different empirical theories, and maybe this option is not optimal. Maybe, I don't know. Why this fact somehow bothers me? I think that the high order theory has some faults. Unlike, we know that there are two modifications: high order perception theory and high order thought theory. High order thought theory presupposes conceptualization. I mean, if a mental state is controlled by some other mental state, this some other mental state must be conceptual, must be a thought. And there are some problems, I suppose, with this. Some other problems maybe might be registered in the case of higher order perception theory, but the issue with higher order thought theory is like this. How can we determine consciousness as being as a process, as a mental state being monitored, as you say, by some conceptual state in some third persons? If I'm human, well, this is my proprietary thought experiment. This summer, together with my wife, we were in Astrakhan, and I hoped to obtain an empirical confirmation of the popular thought that Volga River flows into Caspian Sea, because I've never seen it. But we were not lucky, because it appeared that this fact is happening outside the city limits, and we had no time to travel too far, so we were in Astrakhan, but nowhere else in that I still haven't seen with my own eyes Volga flowing into Caspian Sea. But this is part of my belief, my beliefs about the world. According to your model, this is what monitors my voluntary acts.
But which choice of free acts are you talking about?
Just a moment. Imagine that I'm a human living somewhere in Astrakhan, and my voluntary behavior is somehow monitored and affected by the fact that Volga flows into Caspian Sea. And you observe my behavior in this, from the third person and second person perspective, and say Igor is a human whose behavior is guided to a certain extent by the fact that he has the belief that Volga flows into Caspian Sea. But this is quite an obvious observation and an obvious interpretation. And this is the case where your model works. But imagine that I'm not a human, I'm a hamster. I don't know if I look like a hamster, but I live in some hole beside Volga that flows into Caspian Sea. And my behavior also is affected by this fact. And you may see that my behavior has some properties that are obviously determined by the fact that this hamster lives beside the Volga river that flows into Caspian Sea. And what prevents you to say that this hamster called Igor has a belief, a rational belief, conceptualized belief that monitors his behavior and somehow affects it? Only the metaphysical belief, almost mutual, widespread metaphysical belief that people have consciousness and hamsters obviously don't. I don't know. But if we, both we and hamsters are versions of some neural networks, trained neural networks, then I don't see any rational grounds for distinguishing us in such a way that we are in a position to have rational beliefs, which are called thoughts, and these thoughts monitor our voluntary acts.
But Igor, are you now making this argument based on the assumption that hamsters might have thoughts too?
Might have what?
What thoughts?
Yeah, I wonder why do we prevent us from thinking that they might?
Well, because that's what science biology tells us. I'm, gladly taking common beliefs of science. But one might question, yes.
I suspect that you believe that I have concepts and conceptual capabilities because you have because you can communicate with me and hear to hear from you some conceptual judgments. You can't communicate with hamster,
right?
But this fact doesn't prove that it doesn't have conceptual.
No, but that's true, and this is a known problem for philosophy. This is the other so-called other minds problem. We can never be sure about what goes on in the mind of others. We cannot even be sure about what we see. Do we exist, or are we the outcome of some well, if are we brains in a vat? But here I think it is, if one wants to solve as many problems as possible, it's useful to make some assumptions. We cannot think and solve problems without making assumptions. Thinking is making assumptions. So here I'm glad to simply follow the general wisdom, which is that one that most people have, namely that we can think, we other people can think too, and hamsters probably not. And well, there's one other way I could respond to you by saying if they could think and have conscious acts, then it would also be monitored through some set of hypotheses.
Yes, and that is why in this case the behavior of hamster could be interpreted as a behavior of freewheeling subject. If we could ascribe the conceptual thinking to this animal.
Right.
I think that this the issue with this model is that it doesn't have conceptual tools of discriminating subjects that obviously can't be observed as a free-wheeling animals or subjects or whatever, and those who can. That is one thing. Then we goes. Yes, and why?
Just one second, Igor. Are the people happy to sit in the background, or would you like to come a little bit close and join the discussion? It's up to you. It's what you prefer. Maybe you can sit a little bit closer.
I think it's in farther.
What?
I think it's a bit farther than.
Well, I just a suggestion. Please do what's most convenient.
And another issue concerning this high order thought theory of consciousness is I honestly don't understand why conceptual thinking is a better candidate for the role of explanation tool of consciousness than high order perception, or maybe global workspace. Global workspace.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Yes, well, so typically in consciousness studies, one has two schools, to make it simple. One is the school that believes that the essence of consciousness is in, let's say, the rational aspect of it, the thinking part. And others, they say, well, for us, the essential ingredient is the perceptions or qualia, as Nagel, Chalmers, and many others have said. Netlock, yes. I have to admit, the simple answer is I've neglected this part from the start because I'm interested in the interface between consciousness and artificial intelligence. And if there is a link possible, then it is more easy to do it based on the rational aspect of consciousness than on the feeling aspect or the perception aspect. Obviously, I'm not saying that with such a simple model. I'm saying everything that can be said about consciousness. But, well, first of all, I intentionally from the start limited myself to this rational component of consciousness. And second, I do believe that even the perceptual part is ultimately based on the conceptual part, but that's a big discussion. I don't know if you want to go that far, but my intuition says that even perceptions are based on partly conceptual things. In other words, to put it very radically, I do not think that you can really feel a deep feeling as love for someone without some rational ingredient.
Deep feeling of what?
Love.
Love. Passionate love.
Passionate love.
And
especially elevated love.
To feel passionate love, you must have a conception of of whom you love.
True.
Sure. Okay. Yes, and it is particularly strange, but maybe we should better leave it for the next session, because I doubt that the conceptual thinking is the best way of connecting your research concerning free will to your research concerning artificial intelligence and artificial consciousness, because nowadays developments in this area, as far as I'm concerned, show that what GTP is doing, it is not conceptual thinking. It is just probabilistic inference.
Right. Yes. True. But that's why I'm saying that will be one part of the talk next week. That is not, the real deal. That is not going to mimic advanced human thinking. That will be exactly the one part of the talk next week.
Okay.
Precisely because it is not, it's not capable of using sets of coherent hypotheses. I tested it. It can mimic it to some degree, but it cannot really do this conceptual thinking based on logical manipulation of hypotheses. So it's a mimicking machine. It's highly interesting. It's fascinating. But maybe here is the reason why it's still where we still have an advance.
I'm asking this because, in my view, the thing that we call conceptual thinking, and we have the property of conceptual thinking, not because it is somehow implemented in our onboard neural network, but because we are social communicating creatures, we have invented language, and this language has its own properties. And the properties of the language, just the thing that provides us the conceptual rationality. The conceptual thinking comes from language, and Vygotsky showed this, well, to my view, very clearly. We can believe in Vygotsky or not believe in them, but well, I was raised with the ideas of Vygotsky, and to me, what is conceptual in us comes from social realm and from the realm of communication. If we are alone, if we are raised on the uninhabited island, we don't need conceptual thinking in the human sense. We need just being highly trained a neural network that helps us to survive.
But we can still think if we have been raised by other people before we end up lonely on the island.
Yes, you mean Blue Lagoon,
For instance, yes.
the famous movie.
But I see what you mean. Of course, that's an interesting point of view. But here I would distinguish, the organic process which leads to our capacity of thinking from a posteriori logical analysis of what is a key ingredient of higher level thinking. So both I believe are not in contradiction. Yes, we learn how to think due to social interaction. Yes, language is surely the key ingredient of how we are thinking or how we learned it, but one can also look at it from a logical epistemic point of view. What are the key ingredients of the logical process going on? So that's what I focused, and that's where these coherent sets of theory of hypotheses or theories, if you like this big word, come in.
You suppose that there may be logic without language?
Logic of thinking. And that's surely, well, I don't know if that can be related to logic of language.
Okay, that's, I think it's a philosophical difference between us, because in my view, logic inherently and substantially connected to language. And besides language, we don't have any necessity to think logically in the sense of Aristotle.
True.
And usually we don't. Yes, Anastasia smiles. The famous experiment, but by what was the name of the guy? I forgot. That's the problem of aging. Craver, not Craver. Well, I'll remember and I'll tell you. The man who in 1960s did the series of experiments to show that real people, while presented with logical or mathematical tasks, don't, in fact, think logically or mathematically. They don't adhere to the rules of logic and mathematics, but use some probabilistic inferences to practically.
Right, but if you want to solve a difficult mathematical problem, then you need the theory, else you will not find the right conclusion.
Okay, yes. I will send you this article and this discussion on this. Okay, anyway, let's go further. What concerns concerns the letter C, consciousness. Then we can we have the letter M, monitoring. Monitoring is linguistically means revealing. This monitor that stays here reveals for us something that goes on inside this computer. But what goes on inside this computer are physical processes, and what we see on monitor are not physical processes. It's some kind of representation that helps us to some kind of interface that helps us to deal with this computer. What monitoring in your model really monitors? Monitoring, as far as I can understand your model, to monitor is to conceptually think of a mental state, and this means to bring it to the light of what? Of consciousness. But we use this monitoring to explain consciousness.
I simply take the words of this Mahler and Bunge theory, where they say monitoring means to control, to analyze, and to guide. So it is an umbrella concept. I think that one can define these words without relying on consciousness. Okay, connecting to or guiding or controlling seem to me concepts which can be defined without relying on consciousness.
Yes, of course. Let us imagine that it is kind of some conscious processes, but it gives birth to consciousness. This monitoring, yes.
Right.
It could have been unconscious, but
yes,
it produces
yes,
somehow it
yes,
produces
right.
consciousness. Okay. And the CMT model presupposes thought as fundamentally conscious, which is the prejudice of classical philosophy. That's my own words. What about Helmholtz's concept of unconscious inferences? I mean that in your model, as far as I can understand it, thought is a substantially conscious process. We can't think unconsciously. But there was Helmholtz, who was the man who first proposed the theory of unconscious inferences. But inference is a thought process.
Well, I did not say that we cannot think unconscious. Okay, I just said if it is conscious, then it is. Sorry, I said that conscious involves necessarily thinking. Okay, I'm not saying that thinking necessarily involves consciousness.
Oh, yes. Okay. Vice versa. So you admit that there may be unconscious thinking.
Yeah, sure.
Of course. But if we have conscious, it's the result of thought.
Yes.
Not perception of higher order, but
in a slogan you can say that.
Okay. Now what concerns theories, the letter T. Theories may contradict each other. The classical example of ancient Greek tragedies, the conflict between the duty and passion. Both representation of duty and feeling of passion is the integral part of your model. Well, I am, as a free-willing subject, find myself in the context of some moral obligations that are determining me, and passions that I feel to some other people. Or I have some social obligations and some pragmatic thoughts that may contradict to each other. My obligation may drive me to some kind of behavior, and my pragmatic positions may drive me to some other behavior. I have to, your model presupposes that I'm being freewheeling subject. I'm nevertheless determined by my by the whole system of my beliefs, theories, whatever.
True, yes.
Whatever. If they are contradictory, what is my role? I have to solve this contradiction.
Yes.
I'm an ancient Greek. Yes, freewheeling hamster from ancient Greek. I have moral duty and I have passion to some other person. I have to decide this contradiction, and that is why I perish at the end of this tragedy. But if I wonder if the act of resolving this contradiction is not a completely metaphysically freewheeling act, not in the context of compatibility. How do you say this? Compatibility. But an absolute metaphysical freewheeling act in the sense of Kant, for instance.
But I can relate to it in the following way, that for sure, if there is an internal conflict between your passions and your rational beliefs, then yes, according to this model, it is a conscious or free act of a high degree, of a high level, in the sense that you're really doing some serious thinking here. Okay. So I see here an example of the degrees of free will and consciousness. Whether it is the highest form of freedom, that's an interesting question, and I think that my model is too simple to answer that question, but it might be something to look into. Thanks for that idea. I have the feeling that you're thinking, well, it's in these moments that we are the freest.
Yes, because logically, that from contradiction follows anything follows logically.
True.
And that means that morally, behaviorally, if my determining system of theories was asterisks in your model, there is any contradiction between duty and passion or whatever, I can do whatever I want. And that means that I'm completely free, not compatibly free, but absolutely free, metaphysically.
You're absolutely free, but someone else would say, well, no, either you will go for the passion, and then according to Kant, you're not free at all, or you will go according to your rational beliefs. Then, according to this model and according to Kant and many others, you would be more free. So I don't know what you mean with I can do whatever I want.
Well, according to Kant, I'm free only if I opt for duty.
Yeah.
If I don't, if I go after passion, I'm not free.
That's very close to CMT model, but
yes, but
taken at face value in the simplest expression.
Well, I think that Kant, with all my respect to him and admiration of whatever, maybe not quite right in this respect, because if I was not free, I would not face this choice. Nevertheless, I wouldn't be able to observe the possibility to act in accordance with moral law. Because if I'm guided by passion, then I'm guided by passion. What moral law? I just love this woman. I want to leave my wife and go there. But I'm in a situation of doubt.
This is a moment of pure freedom.
Yes, and
others would say, no, there's a moment of slavery to the passion.
No, because I've come through this moment of doubt. Well, for seconds, I thought maybe I should stay with my old wife and should help her until our until the end of our days.
Yes, but one might say this is a beautiful illustration of, in the end, you're still monitoring and thinking through a hypothesis. And in the end, you said, well, this little passion I have here, or this serious passion, let's go for it, is good. You see, that's also a form of monitoring, which is based on ultimately thoughts, conceptual thoughts, one could say.
What falls?
That's okay, let's go for the passion. The thought that it's okay to forget about bourgeois morality and let's go for the passion.
But it's my conscious choice.
Yeah, because it is monitored through some hypothesis that it is okay in this situation to let the passion rule.
So I understand. You ascribe another theory to me.
No, I think it
That would explain. This is the issue that I will touch on further. To explain the moment of my absolute free choice between passion and the duty, you ascribe to me a third theory. Well, we have two contradicting theories: moral theory and, well, passion theory. That maybe it's not a theory, but just a simple drive to follow my passion. But if I have chosen, for instance, the passion, you ascribe a theory to me, according to which I oppose bourgeois moral norms, and that is why I choose to follow my passion.
Yeah, I think that, well, according to this model, which I still will adhere to, during this moment of choice, you have adhered to some hypothesis, namely, let's go for the passion. I think there is a moment of conscious choice in many people when they are deliberating, you know, and when they are torn by passions and at the same time have some, call it moral principles in the back of their head, they may really at this moment of freedom say, well, yes, I know, but I go for the passion.
Okay, let's go further. Yes, and that's the thing about the theory. In this case, a subject must have access to a theory solving contradiction. That's what you have proposed just now. But if the latter contradicts some other theory of the set, we are in a bad infinity, because the third theory may contradict some fourth theory.
Theories people use are always coherent. They just use a set of hypotheses. I'm not saying, certainly not, that, you know, people are always using coherent theories. No, people are very well known to be incoherent very often, everyone. So I'm just saying they use hypotheses.
And what's the kind of determination of from the theory asterisk, if not logical theories?
Well, but people are not always using logical sets of hypotheses. Ideally, they do. In practice, not always.
I just wonder what's the nature of relation of this set of theories to my.
It's basically, you know, a logical implication.
Yes.
Seen from at least from a logical point of view, it's really logical implication. I believe in this, this, and that. I'm in this and that situation. Therefore, follows that. Basically, like in Hempel's scheme of, you know, explanation.
Scientific explanation.
Yeah. It's the same type of.
But as then
our brain is very much trained in doing these things. It can do these things, at least in some moments of you know, rationality, it does it.
If my behavior is logically constrained or determined by a set of theories, maybe it's kind of self-logic, but still, then my argument persists. In the case of contradiction, I'm absolutely free to do anything I want, because from contradiction follows anything. Anything goes.
But I don't see where is the contradiction. One may use an incoherent theory, an incoherent set of hypotheses. I think I've
I mean, well,
I've seen myself in action using incoherent. I see some people that are very dear to me that I'm thinking, well, this is, very incoherent, or at least not complying to what I think is the best set of hypotheses to use. I may be wrong, she or he may be right, but I'm not saying, for God's sake, that everyone is always using coherent and fully logical frameworks. That would be maybe a dream world for advanced artificial intelligence, which maybe one day will replace certain parts of our decision making based on more rational theory. I think in some cases it would be an advance of society.
Let me put it in a systematic way. We have a case where I have two theories in my set of theories that contradict each other. For instance, moral theory and, well, my perception of my passion. Well, let's call it theory, for instance. To solve this contradiction, yes, and I opt to behave in compliance with passion. You say that in this case, I invoke the third theory, the theory against bourgeois values.
You opt the hypothesis that it is okay, that it will be beneficial for you to let the passion prevail.
Okay, but if
you're not doing it, in other words, based on nothing.
If, for instance, I evoke this anti-bourgeois theory to justify or to determine my passionate behavior, then it may be that this third theory contradicts some force there.
Sure.
That I also hold.
But that's what I do not believe. I believe that, for instance, in this concrete case, there is some hypothesis that you're making and say, okay, well, it's not fully morally okay, maybe according to Kant's theory and so on, but it will still be beneficial for me. So that's a very simplistic belief. That's not a full theory. It's a very simplistic hypothesis, but at least it's a hypothesis.
But my point is that if the relation between all this set of theories and my behavior is logical, that is, my behavior is logical inference from this theory, then we might occur in the situation of bad infinity of contradictions. But if you say that this relation between my set of theories and my behavior is not strictly logical, it's some kind of other relations.
Maybe informal logic, yes. Often we make decisions based on some intuitive probability calculation, and that's not a strict deduction.
Probability calculation, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, but my theory is very simple. It certainly does not say that we are always taking logical decisions. I'm just supposing here that if we do a conscious act, it involves some hypothesis, which that's the main.
My observation, just maybe a bit vague for the moment, looks like this. Holding a theory may determine one's action, but in a different sense than Earth's mass determines movement of the moon. The difference is in predictability, because if you know the mass of the Earth and mass of the moon, and you know Kepler's laws, you strictly predict the orbit of the moon for thousands or millions of years. But if you know that all the set of my theories that I adhere to, consciously or not, you may hardly predict all the things that I'm going to do in 5 minutes or in a month.
I don't know. If you would really, have access to all the hypotheses, the theories, then I think that we would have a good chance. We could predict with good likelihood what we are going to do. But of course, we have absolutely no access to all the hypotheses and things to believe, right? So it's a very hypothetical situation.
Why then can we predict the movement of the moon,
Because those are much simpler systems.
the tidal
Because they're
cycles of
they're so simple that we can describe them with mathematics. You have we all have a highly complicated brain. You're a very complicated system, which physics can absolutely not deal with. It's much too complicated, so we cannot predict what people are doing, because they are the ultimate reason. Surely is, I believe, because they are too complex systems. Our theories are not capable of dealing with. We can sometimes, if we have access to some hypothesis that people are using, oneself or other people, we can, infer with some likelihood what a person is going to do, but this is not so often the case.
But then we come to a picture according to which what we call free will is just the problem of interpretation of complex systems and nothing more.
I would have to think about that.
As far as I remember, the discussions about around quantum mechanics and quantum physics, there are different interpretations, Copenhagen and other things. According to some of them, the quantum probability is the case of our not just ignorance, but the fact that the quantum objects are so little that any attempt to measure them
Disturbs it.
Disturbs them and somehow blurs our vision of this. And that is what the quantum probability is about, according to this interpretation. According to other interpretation, quantum probability is just ontological.
Fundamental uncertainty.
Yes. Concerning what we call free will, what of these two interpretation is correct?
Well,
Free will of electrons, yeah.
Free will of electrons.
I don't believe that, because I do not believe that electrons have, coherent sets of hypotheses.
I mean, we have to presume free will of people just because we don't have sufficient enough conceptual means to interpret human behavior deterministically.
Right.
Or the free will has some ontological presence in the world.
Very interesting question. I think that the answer that I would give was in the last slide. So I think we should look at it from a complementary point of view. I think that ultimately, even electrons are determined. This is a minority position, as Vladislav knows very well, in the philosophy of physics debate, because the majority position is that there is an intrinsic ontological uncertainty on the quantum level. Okay, that quantum probabilities are not due to factors we do not know, but which do exist. So that's the majority point of view. I'm in a heretic school. I pursue this with big interest. I believe that it makes no real sense to to speak of fundamental uncertainty for many reasons. But so, as I said, I believe in determinism. Okay? I believe that even electrons, even the neurons, a fortiori, are guided by deterministic laws. But at the same time, we do have a form of free will, which consists of our capacity to think, capacity to monitor our acts through conscious sets of beliefs, hypotheses. I think that both are very important and interesting angles to study the question of free will. Okay. I think they should be explored both. Okay. Today I spoke about one aspect of it, because that's let's say ontologically less it's lighter. Okay, supposing that everything is determined, including our beliefs and our feelings. That's for many people a very heavy assumption. I like it, but people tell me, people tell me, Louis, this is a horrific worldview. it makes me depressive to think that I'm determined. So it's for many people it rings a fatalistic bell. I do not see this. I find that the philosophy of Spinoza, of Parable, of what's the other famous philosopher who studied free will through the lens of hard determinism. There is another, forgot his name. I think it's fascinating. And I think it is very, very important that we philosophers study it. I didn't have the real chance to do it. You can only, study so many problems. But I think it is high time that our society takes this into account. For instance, this has as consequences that people should have an extremely tolerant point of view, even towards criminals. I'm not saying that punishment should not exist anymore, but it should be dealt with extreme care. But Spinoza and many other philosophers have already brilliantly spoken about this. Still, I believe it's a very important and fascinating topic.
There is some place in your article that says that free will is gradual.
Yes.
But the moral responsibility is not, as far as I
True. It's less graded in the sense that as soon as you have a little capacity of consciousness, of monitoring through more or less rational beliefs, then you're already morally responsible. Okay. Of course, there is also a degree there, but if you deny moral responsibility, then you could not punish people like Hitler anymore. You would say, okay, no, they are determined. So and of course, it makes sense to have a system of punishment for criminals.
I read somewhere that the moral responsibility is the problem for Islamic theologians, because in Quran it is written that everything is predetermined.
Right, Buddhists, Oriental philosophers in general, they are rather on the determinist side. But as many philosophers have said, we should still keep our legal and punitive systems, if only to avoid that, too many people say, yes, I'm determined to break into this bank. Don't punish me because I had to do it. So there is a good reason to
Just get rid of the causes that determine me to rob the bank.
Yes.
And those causes are economical, class.
Right. Yeah, which is a very good answer from some point of view. In an ideal society,
we have some limitations.
I just wanted to ask that we gradually move towards the discussion, because I think
Okay.
there are a lot of questions.
Let me point out my last
I
points.
think from this off, because we're not demonstrating anything anymore.
Yes.
Maybe some people. Yeah, okay. No, I was thinking
I think
that you were.
that we could have a discussion, sit like in a circle.
That would be nice.
Another problem with the so-called theoretic determination of behavior is the human problem. The problem which says that normative entailments can't follow from descriptive theories, descriptive judgments. If my theories in the set of my theories with asterisks are mainly descriptive, then they can't determine my behavior, because the normative doesn't follow from the descriptive.
Right. But here, simple. I see what you mean. Many things could be said. Simple answer is that you also have normative theories, right? Moral theories are normative theories.
Yes, if I do, then everything is the main part of my behavior may be explained. But if I don't have any more, yes, and the case, the Trina's case is very interesting, because we have such words used as brainwashing and inadequate, inadequate theories. So we have we take the position of moral judgments, moral condemnation of the theories that constitute the theoretical world of the treatment. And I can give you an examples of quite different moral systems. I read somewhere that in the ancient Lydia, you know, this, yes, well, I think it was in the territory of Turkey, but well, I don't know. There was an ancient state called Lydia. And I've read somewhere that they considered a virtue, a moral virtue, if a young girl earns how to say that in English, dowry. Dowry is the thing that is given to its fiancé, earns her dowry by prostitution. We have the case of the so-called temple prostitution, where respected, esteemed women, married women, went to temples and give sexual services to religious pilgrims, anonymous.
Well, morality is for a big part influenced by social conventions.
Yes, the thing is that if you have a social system, then whatever morality keeps it integral, it is good, it is fine. If prostitution is legal and, well, how to say it, promoted, promoted, then it's okay. I always advise my students and any other people to see well, I think it's a work of genius. The Japanese movie called The Legend of Narayana. Haven't you seen this? It's a film, well, as far as I know, it's a remake of some older film from 1950s, but I've never seen the original. I've seen the remake, and it's absolutely geniusly done. And the plot is that the action goes inside a very strange community, which is high in the community, very little community of people that live high in the mountains. And from the scenes, we even can't determine the historical period in which it takes, because they have no technologies, no whatever, except the very primitive agricultural technologies. And they don't have absolutely no interaction with the people in the valleys. They live separately. But the only junction with the people in the valley is a merchant that comes once in a year with one purpose: to take a newborn girl, to change her for a sack of salt, and the salt is available, and to bring her to the school of geisha. And those people who live in the mountains then consider girls, newborn girls, as currency. Well, they are valued, and newborn boys as just trash. They kill them and throw them away.
Sorry, what?
Newborn boys, they consider it trash. They kill them.
All of them.
Not all of them, but many of them, because they are just, as we say in Russian, лишние рты. How can we say it in English? Spare mouses.
I see.
Mouse. They kill them, throw away. The movie starts with the scene when a peasant works on his field, finds the corpse of a newborn boy, and started arguing with his neighbor. Again, you have thrown this boy at my field. And well, absolutely awful things happen within this community from our point of view. Why it is called the legend of Narayana? Because the nearby mountain called Narayana, and they believe that when a person has lived up to 70 years, a son of this man or woman must take this older person on his back and bring them by foot to this Narayana and leave leave the old man or woman there for the spirits to take the person to some kind of heaven. But, well, of course, really they die there from cold, from hunger, and everybody knows this. But they pretend they believe for spirits and the heaven. That's the model of society that is constructed upon immoral rules from our point of view, but they are integral. They live, and some of them are happy living there. That's very interesting. And I have another issue with your IE theory, but we have limitation of time, and we better leave it for the next session.
It's not that we have any official limitations. It's just I think it's
yes, of course.
better to move on to the discussion. By the way, about what you said about Lydia.
Excuse me 1 second. My girlfriend, she expected me downstairs. Can we bring her here or?
Of course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Значит, we can switch to Russian or?
Что, пожалуй, это не будет невежливо. То, что вы сказали про Лидию, интересно, я слышала просто, что во многих древних обществах женщина достигала такого же правового статуса, что и мужчина, только, как бы, ну, грубо говоря, в 3 социальных ролях. Вдова, жрица и блудница. И в эпосе Гильгамеша есть богиня, которая сочетает в себе все эти 3 социальные роли. Ну, то есть
она выше мужчин. По сумме добродетели.
Ну, по своему правовому статусу, да. Давайте с вами продвинем свою, чтобы мы с вами сели и поставим сюда.
Мне оставаться здесь или переместиться?
Что вы можете сесть? Мы сядем как-нибудь, чтобы нас примерно всех было видно, и, я надеюсь, слышно. Но если что, всегда можно повернуть.
Еще girlfriend надо посадить.
Ну, где-то куда-нибудь посадим. Вам дать технику вашу? Подожди.
Я просто пытаюсь, я пропустил много. То есть он такой вот компатибилист, то есть он все-таки детерминизм для него это что? Это укорененность каких-то необходимых законов природы.
Вот у меня, я же внимательно прочитал одну из 3 статей, у меня создалось впечатление, что вот он, может быть, смешно сравнивать, но делает примерно то же самое, что Кант. Кант для того, чтобы обосновать науку, показывает, что наука на самом деле не изучает мир, как он есть. Правильно? То есть вот это как бы обоснование ее аподектичности за счет ограничения ее, собственно говоря, прав, эпистемических прав. А вот Луи делает примерно то же самое. Он говорит, да, я вот сейчас объясню, почему свободная воля совместима с детерминизмом, но за счет того, что она тоже оказывается разновидностью детерминизма. Просто более сложная, там накрученная система с теорией, с какими-то гипотезами.
Нет, ну, компатибилисты, да, они так и делают, но они все время ссылаются на детерминизм, не раскрывая и, как бы, его. Я всегда не могу понять.
Нет, ну даже, предположим, это лапласовский детерминизм.
Но это же, это как бы странно ссылаться.
Вот. А потом в конце он начинает говорить, хорошо, не компатибилизм, а комплементарий, да? Дополнительность. Но, насколько я понимаю, в физике дополнительность это что значит? Один ряд феноменов мы изучаем с помощью одной теории, объясняем с помощью одной теории, а другой ряд феноменов мы объясняем с помощью противоречащей.
Они несовместимы, но дополняют друг друга.
Вот. То есть мы как бы вот сдаемся на милость, боги нам не дают возможности разрешить противоречие этими 2 теориями. Давайте вот эту использовать там, где она работает, а ту использовать, где она работает. Это волновая корпускулярная теория света, это квантовая механика и общая теория относительности. В общем, там, по крайней мере, вот 2 примера физики, да, есть. Он предлагает сделать, насколько я понимаю, в конце слайда. Но как по-русски компатибилизм? Совместимость, да? Да. Совместимость это же не комплементарность, это не дополнительность. То есть они должны быть совместимы, другой совсем другой подход. И я не очень понимаю, какой он выбирает.
Я так понимаю, что он все-таки за дополнение.
Вот, в конце вдруг у него дополнительно влезает. Но это уже не компатибилизм тогда.
Получается так.
Ну да, и он там, как у Канта, да, по-моему, было на слайде, что типа, вот для животных и людей мы используем свободу воли, а для всех других объектов не используем. Да там детерминизм. Но
Вот, кстати, я
почему
предлагал
это?
самому Ульяне подключиться. Вот как насчет растений? Есть ли свободная воля?
Вот, я думаю, что Ульяна бы поспорила.
Недавно новость какая-то была, что помидоры по-разному реагируют на растения друзей, растений врагов, и как-то на химическом уровне.
Ну, это еще не свидетельствует о свободе воли.
Да, нет, про общение.
Мгм.
Нет, у нее там есть целый... Я, правда, не... Все время я видел объявления ее выступления, в том числе и популярных, там, в партии Горького.
Мгм.
Вот, где она рассказывает о коммуникации,
Да.
коммуникации растений. Потому что там тоже есть такая зоосемиотика. Не зоо, конечно, а
Биосемиотика.
биосемиотика. Да. А значит, у них тоже какая-то концептуализация.
Получается так.
Yes, here's Anna.
Здравствуйте.
Just wait a moment.
Yeah. Where should I sit here?
Maybe there, so
I can see.
Thanks, by the way, Igor, for the many interesting comments, and of course, I will take them into account, and we can gladly discuss further.
Okay, so we'll start the discussion, and I suggest that we start with our participants in Zoom and then move on to in person. I think, Valeria, you have several questions to ask Louis and others maybe.
Yeah, hello everybody, but I actually already wrote them, so I can just put them in the chat and maybe you can answer them.
I can read them aloud.
Yeah, okay, so then I put them there.
Mhm. So, okay. The first question is, you were using quantum mechanics, the Schrödinger equation, to support determinism, but quantum mechanics, for example, collapse the wave function, can also be used to support indeterminism.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And you're absolutely right. Okay, most people would use quantum mechanics to defend indeterminism, actually. But well, this would open a very long discussion, which maybe we can have together another time with Vladislav. The fact still is that the collapse of the wave function, is happening only at certain moments. Most of the time, quantum systems evolve deterministically according to the Schrödinger equation. So of course, there is a collapse of the wave function when one measures. But that is when the human beings, experimenters, are interfering with the quantum systems. So that is one part of the answer. I would still say, even if it is debatable, that quantum mechanics in this sense is a deterministic science. My main argument for determinism is actually based on a causality, okay, not on quantum mechanics, but on the fact that human beings, according to my favorite point of view and according to many scientists, are still ultimately biological and therefore also physical or biochemical, if you prefer, systems. If that is the case, then everything that happens in the brain is caused, the consequence, or is based on laws of nature. Where would an uncaused free act germinate here? If everything is physical and therefore subject to physical laws, deterministic or indeterministic action, where would be the place where an uncaused mind event would take place? I do not see it. So let me stop it here as an answer.
Okay. Valeria, maybe you have something to say?
Yeah, it depends on how much time we actually have. Yeah, hello.
We have
Yeah.
As long as we are not tired to sit here.
Yeah,
So
one,
It depends on you.
one point here. Do you believe that quantum indeterminacy is compatible with free will? Do you think that free will based on a random phenomena, probabilistic phenomena in our brain, are a good basis for free will? Would you?
I don't have a position on this debate. I'm just aware of different possibilities, and I know that one of them is to motivate the existence of free will by the fact that there is indeterminism according to physics.
True, true. I disagree, but okay, it exists, this position, yes.
So my objection is actually not that not to argue for any particular position here, but just to say that when you are speaking about how physics is involved in this debate, I would say only a place that it's involved. It can be involved at both sides. That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
Maybe next question then, yeah.
So the next question is, relatedly, determinism should be opposed to indeterminism, while compatibilism and incompatibilism, you seem to use a mixed distinction. I think, is it about the, I think it's a question about using different terms in different oppositions.
So in the beginning, when you were saying about hard determinism versus libertarianism and the mixed position, so at this point, so determinism and indeterminism, these are questions about physics, while compatibilism and incompatibilism are questions about whether the existence of free will is compatible with determinism. Always physics more generally, with what physics says, yeah, whether it's ruled out by some physical claim or not.
I'm not sure I understood the question. Usually compatibilism is understood as a position that claims that free will can exist even in a deterministic world. And determinism is here understood in a physicalist sense usually, or slightly more generally, it's called nomological determinism. So I didn't understand if you have a problem with that.
Yeah. So the problem was that you were when you were introducing different positions. So it was still in the introduction after you were presenting different definitions of free wills, and you were saying we can broadly distinguish two views on free will, and one is determinism. But determinism is, I mean, if you want a view on free will, it will be not determinism, but compatibilism and incompatibilism. Okay, so objection is determinism and indeterminism, they are not about free will, they are about just physics, right? These are not views about free will. These are views about what physics says. Does physics say that given some initial conditions, we can uniquely predict the development of the system? These are not claims about free will.
Yes, I agree that ultimately if we can define free will, then it is a question which is independent of determinism or indeterminism. It's a cognitive capacity, and you can define I believe that the only way to coherently define free will is this compatibilist notion, and that is independent of whether the universe is deterministic or indeterministic.
My objection here is simply about the classifications you are using. Okay, so it's not about whether about any particular view of what free will is really is and what it is compatible with or incompatible. Okay, objection is simply about the categories you're using. So when you're speaking about determinism versus indeterminism, this is not a question about free will, it's a question about simply what physics says. As I said, the usual definition, which I know at least, is a theory is deterministic if given the initial condition or a development up to some point, you can uniquely predict what goes afterwards. And it is indeterministic if you have at least two different predictions about how the world or the system will evolve after having specified everything up to the point where you're asking about how it will evolve. I was just saying that the position between determinism and determinism, this is about purely physics, while compatibilism versus incompatibilism, this is the position about different views of relationships between the existence of free will and whether physics is deterministic or indeterministic. And I was framing this as an objection because when you were presenting different positions, it seemed like you were putting at the same side hard determinism and kind of libertarianism, which was more like a compatibilism. And so I had an impression that you are mixing purely physical claims about how systems evolve and claims about whether free will is compatible with particular evolution.
Okay, maybe, yeah.
Okay.
You know the time, Valeria, because I'm just in these first slides repeating what is the general position in the debate on philosophy. People do usually oppose hard determinism and libertarianism. And there is a third position, which is compatibilism, which says that determinism, nomological determinism, is not in opposition with the possibility of free will. This is, you know, the general
I think we just have different like backgrounds, because the way it was taught to me, there was this opposition. These two questions were different, and you are saying that the usual way it's presented, as far as you know, it's different. Okay, so maybe we just have different backgrounds. Mine is when I was in Belgium, we had the project on free will and neuroscience, and I know mostly from there. Okay, let's maybe go to the third question.
And the third question was, if conscious choice is necessary for free will, then Libet's experiments and Buridan's donkey are no longer about free will, while presumably they should be.
These are objections to your own theory and what you derived from.
Necessary, yes.
Well, actually, in one of the articles, I look at this experiment of Libet through the lens of the CMT model. Okay, and I don't really remember anymore what I said. Do you remember, Igor, what I wrote in this longer article that you wrote? I looked through this experiment by Libet through the lens of the CMT model. And I think I came to the conclusion that, well, there is some kind of monitoring going on, even if it is a very rudimentary form of monitoring. People still, yeah. And so there is a limit. I think that my conclusion is that, yes, there is a limited form of freedom in these Libet experiments, exhibit, because, there is a form of very rudimentary, but I should reread my article. It's 4 years ago or something. Usually people say this is an experiment about free will. And well, in any case, it's very clear that when they suddenly press a button, okay, they're not using much of hypothesis, neither beliefs. This is a reflex-wise thing. So according to my model, this is a very rudimentary, there can at max be a very rudimentary, very elementary form of free will going on. That's my analysis of Libet's experiment.
Yeah, I think there are different ways to reply. So one is when I say presumably they should be examples of free will. So one, I mean, a different way to reply here for you would be to say that Libet experiments are simply not examples of free will, and that was sometimes argued. And but why I'm asking this, because I think there was some old conception of free will by which it should allow for spontaneous choice, which is not motivated by anything, and apparently your approach rules out this kind of conception, and then someone could object to you because I mean it's a question about whether this kind of conception should be preserved in your account or not. I think that you would need to argue that it should not be preserved, even if you think that you can account for Liberty's experiments. I think your conception, your approach rules out this old conception, which is about spontaneous choice, and perhaps you would need to motivate that it shouldn't be kept. Okay. Maybe there's a fourth question. We can go to the first question. Yeah.
Yes. And the final question is: if reasoning is necessary in your account, then the resulting will not.
No, then the resulting will, because it's supposed to be an account of free will. But okay, if reasoning is necessary for your account, then the resulting will is not really free because it's constrained by logical laws and reasons.
Yeah, you can see it that way. It's, if I understood you correctly, you say that if in free will there is a rational component, or there is a rational component, then it is not free will. Is that what you're saying?
It's, I am saying it's not free because it's constrained by logical laws and your reasons.
Yes, there is a form of constraint, but let's say at least by reasons in which you yourself can believe. As you know, I'm a compatibilist, and moreover, I'm someone who has sympathy for this deterministic worldview. So for me, constraints are not a problem. They are a necessary ingredient of reality. But, well, I can say something more, which is that this monitoring through hypothesis is part of free will according to the CMT model.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Very interesting. I think we have applied on everything, and good luck with the further studies.
Thank you.
Okay, Alexander, do you have any questions? Well, if Alexander has any questions, I think he'll let us know.
We have one.
Yes, Louis, thank you for your presentation. It's very interesting for me. I'm a little bit confused. Maybe you can clarify it to me about the degrees of free will. And I think that we could call it the highest degree of free will if we can rationally change our beliefs and our hypotheses and our theories. And if we have a person who has some theory or hypothesis that tells him that it's not right, it's not rational to change your beliefs, change your hypotheses, you always should go through, like, follow your personal beliefs. Yeah, you should not change it.
So that is less free than someone who's willing to
can we say that this person is less free? Can this person like grow up to the next level, or these degrees are just determined by the biology, by the physics, and so on?
That's a very good question. Yes, so this degrees of freedom, the degree of free will, probably there are, I sense that there might be different dimensions. And one of the dimensions is the one that you're mentioning, so the capacity to be capable of changing one's hypothesis, one's worldviews, one's beliefs. That's an interesting measure of degrees of freedom. But it certainly is not the ultimate one, it's not the last one, because that one would say that the person who is constantly changing his beliefs is the freest, which certainly is not the case, because that becomes like a neurotic behavior, right? If you constantly change your beliefs, then that's not really a high level form of free will, I would say. Another dimension, therefore, is also the adequacy of the hypothesis and the theories you're using. In other words, how good they are as a representation of reality. Okay, so that's an elitist position. In contemporary philosophy, you rarely, I think, see these things. Well, I think that's a mistake. There is, I think, a good ground for believing that you can very cautiously distinguish different degrees of freedom by, the quality of the hypothesis or the beliefs that people use to make in certain contexts. So that's another dimension. But the one you mentioned certainly is a very interesting one too. And maybe it's a combination of those, and maybe there are other dimensions. Okay, someone who, of course, is born with the perfect hypothesis for every act, you could also say, well, that's maybe also not a very free person. So that's a good point.
And my other, more comment than a question. If we will refer to evolutionary theory, some kind of that, basically every kind, every species has an adequate biological system to this world, right?
Yes.
And
can we evolve to be adequate?
Yeah. Can we say that the human is not fully evolved to be fully adequate? Yes, and our free will, our choice
has to point a lot of things.
It is to evolve, to be fully adequate to this world. And if you are fully adequate, if you will evolve by your own choices, that means that you're a fully free will person.
I'm happy to leave this as a beautiful conclusion. Yes. Yes. That's a nice way to put it. Yes. Yeah. Yes, why not? Yeah. I think it's yeah. Yes.
And yes again.
I think if with this, unfortunately, I miss few slides. Could you clarify how you differ freedom and free will? I think they are two different things because free will it's something concerned with our thinking about possible future, not the situation in this moment. And when you say about theory and hypothesis, I try to understand what do you mean about theory is something static thing, and hypothesis is about possible future and how human beings compare different possible future or human beings has create some possible scenarios of the future, compare,
yes,
and make a choice, and it is not freedom.
Right.
Freedom
is more an external.
We can say positive, negative freedom.
Yeah. It depends. Freedom, I would say, depends on the society we are living in for a big part, right? For the external conditions which are given to us in which we are living. I have the freedom here to speak. I have less freedom to do whatever I want. About certain political issues, it is perhaps better not to speak. While free will is considered to be you know, an internal capacity of the mind
Why mind?
or brain or
Why brain?
personality or personality.
Well, what is personality? It's many questions.
Yes, but to answer, so two questions on those. First, what is the difference between free will and freedom?
Yeah.
That's an interesting question, a difficult question. I should think more about it, but one thing I know because I've read it several times is that, well, free will typically is considered to be a capacity of the agent, and freedom has more to do with freedom of action or freedom of speech, which is for a big part, you know, imposed by external conditions, by society, notably. One can have full absence of freedom of action, but still have free will. Okay, someone who is in jail, usually people say, I can still have a free will.
Well, when we say will, not desire. Will, it's something active action, yeah. And what is the source of active action? And in your opinion, could we say about free will without the source, internal source of action and the intention to somewhere?
Yeah, very good question.
In future, somewhere that we don't see around us, we don't have some theory.
Well,
We intend to the unknown future.
I would say that the only way in which we can act rationally and shape our future is through adequate worldviews which we have. So you mentioned different possibilities. The only way to rationally compare and deliberate about
Why
possible
irrational
or irrationally, if one prefers to act rationally, then of course one uses irrational motive
intuitively, yeah.
and or intuitive things. But many people will say that the best way to project futures is to have solid hypotheses and sometimes even theories about how this could do. Theories are very often called counterfactual machines by which you can imagine all kinds of counterfactual scenarios. So that's
What's the source of the counterfactuals?
the theories. There's no way to judge the truth of counterfactual claims, notwithstanding what the famous philosopher David Lewis says, and it's very complex possible world semantics. People have shown that this leads to nothing. To say it bluntly, it is wrong theory. The only way to judge whether you know possible scenarios will work or not, or the most efficient one, is to use the theories which we have about this these possibilities. I'm writing an article on it, so I'm a little bit passionate about this thing. Because I think that Lewis has put many philosophers on a very wrong track for decades. So the only way to judge the value, the truth value of counterfactual claims is theories. Conceptual, coherent conceptual frameworks. That allows you to say if, for instance, the strength of the gravitational force would be divided by 2, how fast my ball would fall.
What kind of the theory of gravitation do you mean? Einstein theory, Newton theory, or maybe Feynman? Many possible paths.
The best we have.
Theory. All these theories are contradict with each other. And when you say about theory only physics theory.
Well, depends on,
But it's
on the possible world you are looking at. If you are asking questions about how should I, launch this ball, then you better use, the best physical theory which is stand. Here, Newtonian physics is more than enough. You don't need relativity theory. If you are looking at what is, something I can do to increase the happiness of me and my dear ones, then, it's rational to use, for instance, theories of, morality or of simple common sense, which tells you, well, this person might like this, or you see. Usually there is very, in many cases, there is a consensus of which theory is better than another. And of course, theories, again, in a very broad sense, depend, well, on the context. In certain contexts, one uses sociological theories, other psychological ones, other very rudimentary theories about, I don't know how your car works. I call this all theory with a star. So
You say about theoretical relativism.
yes, that's a
There is no only right theory. There are many theories. Depends on the context. We take like instrument from the rocks. This theory for this case, this theory, but we don't know about.
no. We often know which theory is better than another. For instance, scientists have, agreed that relativity theory is ultimately a stronger theory than Newtonian mechanics. Not always. In many cases, we of course do not yet know if the theory is final. That we actually never know. But very often we know which theory is more efficient than others. There is no way to know what is the absolute theory, but there is often a way to judge theories.
More efficient in
Predict
now moment, as pessimistic meta-induction says that contemporary theorists in some decades will be wrong. And we know.
Yeah, I mean, we will never know whether our theories are the absolute truth.
But
That's
the history of science
shows
says
that.
about this. Yes. Yes. Okay, it's my my worry about notion about free will, about determinism. You say about nomological necessity, yeah, as a ground of determinism, and I worry about this. Yeah.
Many people would worry about, so you're certainly, among many people. But we can have another talk about this because that's a very interesting topic.
Yeah.
And one other thing is that the CMT model is independent, or whether this nomological determinism is true or not. Okay. I said, I believe that one should use both theories, but if even adepts of indeterminism would use this model.
I'm not sure if in this, I think if you say about theories, hypothesis, determinism, I think this model isn't free from these conceptions. It's my thoughts. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Beautiful.
Am I interpret your model right if I think that in that model free will don't depends on determinism or indeterminism paradigm, because the components of that actualized the free will are working in the deterministic paradigms and indeterministic paradigms. I mean, the consciousness, sorry, and the monitoring, etc. So, am I right in interpreting your model on?
Did you say that it's independent of whether the universe is deterministic or indeterministic?
Yes.
Yes, that's totally right. That's totally right. Yeah.
Okay.
So this is not for the model itself. It's not an issue. At the same time, I'm also a determinist. So I think that's why I say that, you know, to go a little bit further than the CMT model, I think that me personally, I'm not saying I'm right, it's my hypothesis, that it is even better to also look at things through the lens of determinism, as Spinoza and many others did. This question of determinism is one of the most difficult, I guess, in both physics and philosophy. So, and it is also a minority position. This is a topic I'm working on. So to look at this question of determinism from the angle of quantum mechanics, I'm working with physicists on deterministic theories which could underlie quantum mechanics. So there are, for instance, fluid mechanical theories of quantum mechanics, where people are beginning to do experiments showing that fluid mechanical systems can mimic quantum systems to an amazing extent. It's not conclusive work. This will take a lot of time, but that's one way to maybe go further in this question of determinism. Another way to go further on this question, is the world ultimately deterministic or indeterministic, is the theory of probability. That's one of my favorite topics. I wrote an article on that to show that there are three questions from probability theory which only can be answered by the assumption of determinism. And these questions are: what is probability? What is correlation, probabilistic dependence? And the third one is why are there so many Gaussian probabilities in nature? This can be nicely, coherently answered by the hypothesis of determinism. These are just a bunch of converging hypotheses, which, you know, made me believe that this is a stronger hypothesis than many people believe. The standard quantum mechanics professionals will say, well, no, there are theorems like Bell's theorem, which seem to indicate that the world is irreducibly indeterministic, probabilistic. But that can be debated. That depends on very heavy metaphysical assumptions. So, you know, there is a lot of work there to do. If people are interested, we can have a very interesting discussion on that. It's a fascinating topic, super difficult. I'm absolutely not saying that, you know, I have proofs. I have intuitions and some arguments to say that determinism is a more interesting hypothesis than official quantum mechanics tells us. But okay, this is, you know, not really the topic of today. The topic of today was a compatibilist model of CMT, right? But if I show you the back of my tongue and I say what I really think, I say, yes, CMT, okay. But if you talk about, you know, this absolutist notion of free will, do we have the possibility to really choose between different options which would be germinated in us? Then I would say, no, I cannot believe that. So from this point of view, I'm a Spinozist or determinist. But okay, once more, that was not really the topic of today's talk, but with pleasure we could discuss it some other time with more arguments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I have a couple of remarks and a question. You discussed the rational and coherent incoherent dichotomy, and you mentioned that if everyone behaved logically and coherently and rationally all the time, it would be an ideal world for AI, and I think so, but I think it would be a terrible world for people to live in. And the second thing I wanted to say on the topic is that I hope that next week I'll start teaching English to people online, and I have watched several webinars on teaching, and in a video where person was talking about how to teach grammar to people, they said that there are basically two ways when people complete grammar tasks, and they either see the situation, remember the suitable rule, and apply it. So we can call we could say that they complete the task rationally, or they say, "Oh, I see the sentence, and this option sounds bad, and this option sounds good, and I will intuitively go for something that sounds good." And both ways can be efficient. And what's more, I think that when this intuitive thinking, intuitive completion of tasks, and furthermore intuitive usage of language becomes when you use the language intuitively and use it correctly, this shows proficiency and fluency of the person.
Yeah, that's a very interesting mark. I think it's it is linked to what Igor called unconscious rationality.
Inferences, unconscious inferences.
Yes, unconscious inferences.
It's
Surely these
not
exist. It's very honest of you to. Well, yes, that surely exists, but well, one could very simply remark that even if it is the thing is, well, one should make a link to the topic of today, which is what is consciousness. Okay, if people are unconsciously applying rules, then it's not really related to what you are talking about today.
But I think it just it was just a remark, just a thought I had. Yeah, no, I mean that we can talk about intuition in terms of consciousness, and I think that I would like to think that intuition is just our unconscious usage of something that we consciously learned or heard or percepted some time ago, and now we just use it without the process of thinking, or maybe we're not aware of this process. It just comes to our mind.
Sounds like a good point of view, yeah.
And the question I had, I think that your model, the connection between free will and consciousness is an interesting connection between the philosophy of cognitive science and ethics. And do you think it could be used for some pragmatic things? For example,
what things?
For something practical in a sense, or applied. An example I thought of is imagine we have a person who is a sleepwalker, and imagine they commit a crime while sleepwalking. So according to your model, should they be held accountable for the crime? So what degree of consciousness is it? Was it the...
It's the famous novel by Wilkie Collins, Moonstone.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting question. Here I would say that, you know, the model clearly would say that they're not morally responsible because they have absolutely no free will, or no or very low degree of consciousness, because they're simply asleep. Okay. So here I think that even in court they would be largely, you know, acquitted if it can be shown that the person was really asleep, which is a difficult thing to prove. But if he is really asleep, then I would say he's clearly unaware, so unconscious, no monitoring of his acts through any kind of belief. But thanks for the remark, and very interesting to also deeper think about.
I think that's an interesting topic to explore.
Yeah, absolutely, and also this automatic or unconscious inference is also a really interesting thing to explore further. Yeah. This is a very simple model and should be completed by many other ideas. Thanks to all of you for mentioning those.
Okay, so we're done for today.
I think so, yes.
Okay, so I'll stop the recording.